Hi, my name is Robert Najjar. I am presenting to you today on small hive beetles and honeybee colonies. The theme of this presentation is to keep things very simple. And just remember, it's always better to prevent any kind of infection or disease or the prevention of pest taken over colonies or even your garage, whether it's mice or whatever. It's a lot easier to prevent that than to mediate it. And so my theme here is going to be strictly on how to keep things simple and how to control small hive beetles in our colonies. First, my name is Robert Najjar. I am the president of Summit County Beekeepers Association. I live in Summit County, and I have 3 apiaries in Summit County right now. I am electrical engineer, and I'm also the owner of Digital Integrated Systems. We're a technology company. I am married for 32 years to a beautiful wife, and we have 4 beautiful girls. So I kind of feel what a drone goes through when he's a minority in the hive. Very passionate beekeeper. I'm always eager to learn, and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know enough. I'm also, because of my eagerness to learn more about bees, I am enrolled in the advanced beekeeping program at the University of Florida, and I'm hoping to graduate my advanced level in March of this year, and this would be my 2nd year in that program. What will you learn from this presentation? Well, at the end of the presentation, you should learn about the life cycle of the small hive beetles. How do they breed? The cycle, how do they morph from eggs into a beetle? The kind of damage they could cause to your colonies. And we'll also learn about mitigating and preventing infestations of small hive beetles in your colony or colonies. So what is the small hive beetle? The reason it's called small hive beetle is because it's smaller than other kind of beetles that could live in your colonies. So this was discovered in the United States around 1960s. Don't quote me on that date. I don't know the exact year, but ever since, it started in the southern states, and now it's spreading all over the United States. It's a bug that is built like a tank. Like when a yellow jacket or when a bumblebee goes into the hive, the bees are able to sting it. They're able to drag it out, kick it out, continue to sting it until it's dead, or basically push it out the door, the front entrance. While with the small hive beetle, it's very difficult for the bees to sting it, and it's very difficult to kick it out because of the way it's built. That's why I say it's built like a tank. It's got short clubbed antennas. Later, you will learn how they trick the bees into feeding them with those little antennas of theirs. They also have pointed pronotum, which allows them to hide their legs and protect their thorax pretty much. And they also have hardened wings that cover most of their body. They also have long hair on their legs, and the long hair on their legs serves the purpose of when something is trying to drag them or push them and they don't want to go in that direction, they use the hair to cling to whatever surface they're on. So it increases the friction between the beetle and whatever surface they're on. And so it makes it really hard for the bees to drag them outside the colony. Small hive beetles, an adult female can deposit up to 2,000 eggs in its lifetime. And so they can lay those eggs in protected and unprotected areas. Unprotected area would be an open area that the bees can get to. For example, a hive beetle can scrape the capping on a cell where there might be a bee larva or pupae, and she will lay eggs in there. And the way she does it is it's called ovipositor. Basically, it pushes her ovipositor into the cell, and it starts shooting eggs throughout the walls of that colony. And so when it's done, it moves to the next and next and next cell. So those are unprotected cells, where protected cells could be cracks and crevices in the wood of the hive where the bees cannot get to, but the beetle can extend its ovipositor, and she's able to lay eggs in those tiny cracks, which later will hatch into larvae. So an egg takes 3 to 5 days to hatch. When they hatch, they will feed on whatever is available to them. It's basically an open and unlimited buffet that's available to them in the hive. They can feed on nectar, they can feed on pollen, they can feed on honey, they can feed on larvae, they can feed on bees, sickened bees, or they can also pupae, feed on pupae. So they go through this all-you-can-eat frenzy in the hive, and for about 10 to 16 days, and then they go into the ground. So when they leave the colony, it's like mass exodus, where one evening, you'll just, if you have cameras on your colony, on the entrance, you will see all these larvae leaving the colony, and what they're trying to do is go into the ground, and they want to burrow into the ground, where they can pupate up to 3 to 5 weeks. At the end of the 3 to 5 weeks, and I know this is a wide range, they will emerge as young beetles, and they will start looking for honey colonies around. So the vicious cycle continues. So the way they're built, and I said they have a great defensive position against the bees. And what they do is, when they feel threatened, they can retract and go under the shell, the hard shell that they have that's covering their thorax and most of their body. And so the bees are unable to grab to anything and drag the beetle out. They're not able to sting them because they are the surface is really hard. So what the bees can do, they can push them into a corner. And so they assign prison areas in the hive. Typically, they're in the corners of the colony, of the hive, and they assign guards to keep the beetles in their prison. And so over time, the beetles have developed a really great way, when they get hungry and they're confined to this area where they can't get to food, they can't get to pollen and nectar or brood. And so what they do, a beetle will come and it will use its antennas to massage the mandibles of a bee. And what the bee does is literally throws up its whatever is in its stomach, and typically it's nectar and honey. And so the beetle receives that, eats it, and goes back to its prison. And this is how they're able to sustain being there for a long time without food. Now, talking about assigning assigning guards and confining the beetles to a small area of the hive, you have to imagine you'll need a lot of bees. If you have a lot of beetles, you need a lot of guards. to patrol and confine them to their prison. And this is why in weaker colonies, those beetles are able to escape, and they're able to go and lay eggs all over the hive, and they're able to literally destroy the colony and the hive. A female beetle can lay up to 2,000 eggs in her lifetime. So imagine a beetle can live, let's say, the whole year in your colony, unmanaged. That beetle can become 20,000 beetles, or can produce 20,000 larvae that can literally slime your colony. This larva tunnels through the wax and through the frames. It feeds on honey, pollen, brood, anything that they come in touch with. And they defecate inside the colony. And so their feces has some type of yeast that will ferment, and you open the hive, and it's not like, yay, we got meat. No, it's yay, it smells awful. You pull frames out and things are dripping from them, honey and dead bodies, and it's really disgusting in there. And so the colony is totally destroyed at that point. The bees, it's too late for the bees to mitigate or to defend their colony. And what they end up doing is they pack and they abscond and they go somewhere else. So the facts here is that we really don't have a lot of research on small hive beetles. We don't have a lot of doctors and a lot of universities doing research on the small hive beetles and how to mitigate them and to set levels of panic where it's called IPM, Integrated Pest Management Solution. So when a certain level of beetles reaches a certain critical point, now your colony is in devastation. There's really not much research in there. But what we also know as a fact is that strong colonies have less infestation than weaker colonies. Most of the infestations happen with weak colonies, nukes, and so on. There are really no effective chemicals to kill the bees, at least not organic, as far as I know. And so when there are a couple of products out in the market, but my understanding is that they're very harsh on the queen, very harsh on the bees. So we really need to keep things simple. We need to figure out, okay, how do we have a bug with zero research, not much medication. The bees can't defend themselves. The only thing they can do is push them in a corner. So what can we do to prevent our colonies from getting infested? So when students are taking our beginner classes at Summit County Beekeepers Association, we emphasize on the timing of adding supers or adding another brood chamber to the colony. So when they buy whether they buy a nuke or they buy a package, and that package is growing within 3-4 weeks, more bees are hatching, and so they need to add space. And so especially first-year beekeepers are really excited about, oh my gosh, the colony is growing, I don't want them to swarm, so they add another box when they only have 5 or 6 frames covered in the brood chamber. While adding more space to the colony, while it may prevent them from swarming, it needs to be done with precise calculations. So we tell them, you do not add don't add any boxes, don't add any supers until you have 80% of the space below is occupied by bees. So until you have 8 frames of bees and brood totally covered on both sides, you don't add a second box. Well, when you add a second box and these bees, it's still cold in April, for example, and they're not able to protect that second box because they're clustering around their brood, what happens, beetles finds the colony and they got plenty of room to hide, and the bees are not able to confine them to a small area. So be careful with the amount of space that you can provide in your colony. One thing we do is we go buy pollen patties, and we want our bees to become stronger and bigger. Maybe we want to split the colony, maybe we want more honey. And so what we do is we give them a whole slab of pollen patties, more than they can eat in a week. And that's a ground for infestation. Larvae of the beetles love it. Beetles come and they lay eggs in there. They hatch. It's too late to control it. So be careful about how much pollen you should add to your colony. One way to be able to capture those or trap the beetles is to use unscented Swiffer sheets in the corners of the hive. Remember, the bees are trying to imprison and to corner these beetles, put them in a corner. And so we have really 6 corners that we can go to capture those. So we can put Swiffer sheets in the upper 4 corners, and then we can put Swiffer sheets on the bottom back corners of the colony, so opposite to the entrance. And when the bees try to herd these beetles in the corner, they get into the Swiffer sheet, they try to go under it, and they end up with their legs with so much hair in there, they end up getting stuck. Bees can get stuck. Typically, they can get away from it or unhook themselves. You may lose a few bees here and there, but overall, once the beetle enters that, they're pretty much stuck, and you're able to remove them from the colony a week later or so. There's a lot of traps that you can buy, and what you do is you put them in, you put the trap in the corners between frames, and you fill them with oil, not necessarily to the top, but you put oil in them about halfway. And so what happens is the beetles may smell the oil, or maybe running away from the bees, and they enter that and they get stuck in it. You can also put vinegar and apple cider vinegar or apple cider. What that does, that attracts the beetles. They go in there, they got oil on them, they're not able to climb, and they end up dying. So we talked about strong colonies and weak colonies. You have to keep your colonies strong. I know we split colonies sometimes to prevent swarming. One of the colonies is weak, we give them a lot of space, because when we split them, when we made the split, there were a lot of bees in there. Well, a lot of these bees will, if they're foragers, they will, or they have oriented to the hive already, they will leave that new box and they will go back to the original colony. And so when you make your splits, be careful. Make sure you give enough bees to both, and remediate. If a lot of the bees went back, maybe grab a frame of brood that's just hatching and put it in the new colony so that it's not weak. A lot of ways you can keep your colonies strong. You can feed them. You can give them brood from other colonies, and that's how you keep them strong and healthy, and they're able to defend their colonies from hive beetles. You can raise or buy hygienic bees. We know that there are bees that are more hygienic than others. There are a lot of tests being done, and a lot of breeding that's going on to breed hygienic bees. I won't name any. I don't endorse any of them, but you can tell in your colony, one colony has 3 mites per 300, so 1%, and another colony has 20. Well, one is most likely is more hygienic than the other, and that's the colony. If you're ever gonna graft, that's the colony you want to graft from, because they're able to mediate and defend themselves. The hygienic behavior is not only for the bees, but also for us to what we do around the colony. How often are we in a hurry and we scrape wax Burr comb on top of frames because we don't want to put that top box back in and have it crash. And you want to keep your inside colony, the frames, nice and neat and clean. And you take that and you put it on top of the colony and you forget about it because you're in a hurry or whatever. And you remember a week later when you come back when that comb is there. That attracts hive beetles. You know, they smell it, they come, they lay eggs in it, and then they look down below and say, "Ah, look, there's another colony here, so let me go in there." So they go in there, and that breeding cycle continues. Maintain your equipment. If you have a box or cover, a lid or a frame that has a crack in it, those are the protected areas where beetles can lay their eggs. And their eggs are protected because the bees cannot get to them. So there are multiple ways you can use epoxy. You can do all kind of stuff to cover those cracks, repair them. Yes, water is not going to leak because you have a crack, but a beetle can come and lay a couple hundred eggs in there. So in the spring, go through a process, clean your boxes, make sure there are no cracks. If you drilled holes somewhere for whatever reason because you wanted to staple a cover or wrap on the hive, and go back and those and patch them. Put some wood putty, maybe, I don't know. Glue will work. And last but not least is do not collect honey supers and store them. Do not collect your frames, your cap frames, until you're ready to extract them, because you take those, you put them in the garage, you get busy, and you come back 2 weeks later and the beetles have destroyed them. They laid eggs in there, larva is hatching, and you just throw in boxes of honey. So be careful. If you follow these rules, I guarantee you're going to minimize the infestation. And out of all of those, I can tell you that keeping a strong colony is one way to keep the beetles away. Another thing, if possible, put your colony in the sun, in the sunny area. It seems like we have less infestation with colonies that are hot on the inside and exposed to the sun. Not only the colony is stronger and bigger, but also critters tend to stay away from it. So what do? I do all of what I just preached about. And I can tell a story. During my first year of beekeeping, I did have a lot. I would open the hive and I would see a lot of beetles in there. And I would call my mentor and ask him, what do I do? What do I do? And he's like, okay, put the Swiffer sheets or put the traps. And so I bought traps and I bought Swiffer sheets and I put them in, and I would catch very few, and I would open the cover, and I can tell you I would kill with my tool probably 20 beetles. And then one day I was just going through YouTube channel and doing channels and doing some research, and one guy said, hey, I spray kosher salt or salt under the colonies, because when the beetles, remember the mass exodus where they're leaving and they crawl down through the legs of whatever stand you have and they go burrow in the ground. Well, if you spray salt in there, these beetles can't go in the ground. They die when they touch the salt. And so what I do is those boxes are like 3 pounds and they're $3 maybe. And so what I do is June, July, August, September, I do take a box per 4 colonies, and I heavily spray that entire box on the ground. Well, ever since I started doing that, the number of beetles inside my hives have been reduced to maybe 1 if I see one. Now, is it directly related? I don't know. This is why I'm putting a disclaimer here. Use it at your own discretion. It's not scientifically proven, but if you pick kale from the garden and there are slugs on it or little worms, and you want to get rid of them, what do? I know what I do. I take salt, I put it in a pan, I put a little bit of vinegar, and then I put my leaves in there and soak them for a few minutes, and then I rinse them off, and then all the beetles or all the larvae will fall off of that. It's a cheap solution. It's not gonna destroy your bees. If anything, it will prevent grass and vegetation from growing under your colony, so you don't have to weed whack it. So it's a method that I use, and it has worked for me. It may or may not work for you, but it's worth trying for $3 to $4 of salt 4 times a year. So maybe $12 per apiary. That's not bad. Again, my name is Robert Najjar, and 3 ways to reach me. You can reach me on my personal Gmail account. You can reach me at president@summitbeekeepers.com. And my cell phone number is listed here. I do have a full-time job, so I may not be able to take calls during the day, but you're welcome to text me on that number if you need help or you need additional information. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you learned at least one thing that you didn't know before. And I'm looking forward to a great year next year. Unfortunately, this year we didn't have a great fall, not much in nectar flow, but hopefully next year we'll be compensated for this and we'll have a better year overall. Thank you and have a great day.